Legendary New York City and Coney Island street photographer Harvey Stein is our guest on today's episode of The Crit House. Harvey's been making photographs for decades. He has 10 books to his name. He teaches workshops internationally, has curated almost 70 exhibits. His images are in museums and collections all over the world. Harvey's MyFIVE images include work from Gary Winogrand, Lee Freelander, Ellen Lavigne, Margarita Michalos, and Harvey Stein himself. How do you talk about yourself as a photographer these days? Because you have decades of professional work behind you, and who are you? What are you as a photographer?
I think of I have two real major strains, I guess, and that's street photography and studio portraiture. I've done a lot of portraiture in the studios. I've taught at ICP, but mostly I categorize myself as a social documentary street photographer. I try to photograph, though, from my point of view. I never wanted to be a photojournalist because then that's objective reality.
Mhm.
I'm much more subjective. I'm looking for fun things, funny things, strange things, and I also approach people. I think one of my point of differences is that I feel like I'm a portraitist on the street, where I'm approaching people and even talking to them, not asking them to photograph them, but saying I'm going to photograph them. If I ask them, they could say no, it's
Right.
too easy.
So this assignment of choosing 5 images, some people find to be a challenge. Was it hard for you? And what did you go through in deciding what those 5 images would be?
Well, I don't think I agonized over it, but I did think a lot about it. I thought about who my favorite photographers are. Certainly Gary Winogrand's my favorite street photographer. I love Lee Freelander. I think he's one of the more intelligent or most intelligent photographers around. I was raised on Winogrand and Friedlander. Helen Levitt, not so much, but I saw some of her work lately and came across the photograph we're going to talk about. And then I got the bright notion of showing my image, which I thought might be conceited, but I really don't feel that my work gets out as much as it deserves. And I'm sure everyone feels that way. So this is a really important photograph to me, and we'll talk about that and it was a good exercise. It made me think and look and scrutinize and deal with it, you know?
So,
Anything like this is good.
so
Yeah.
Harvey Stein, let's take a look at your images and talk about why they are your top 5. And you mentioned Gary Winogrand, and we'll start with Gary Winogrand, who has influenced a lot of photographers in this world.
He has. So I don't shoot like him, but I love his work. To me, I'm not a candid street photographer. As I say, I mostly engage people and talk to them. I do some candid when the situation calls for it. But Winogrand's just about totally candid. I don't think he ever talked to anyone on the street. This is the 1964 New York World's Fair in Flushing Corona Park. The park is still there, and there's still a symbol of that fair still there. And I've photographed a lot of people on benches, but I've never found a bench this active and this, I don't know, exciting in a way. I mean, here's an interracial couple on the left talking up a storm, 3 women entangled and sharing secrets, it looks like. And I mean, yeah, this is 1964, and who knows what else. And then the two ladies, both their legs similar. They're looking at a similar thing. One's taking off her glasses, the other has her hand on her back of her head. That they look so. I mean, everyone's in their own world here. And then this man on the right, he is cut off literally and figuratively, cut off by the frame, literally and figuratively, his nose is in the paper, disregarding all the amazing activity and humanity sitting at his elbow. And wow. I mean, it's a stunning photograph. It's full of life, mystery, um, intent. You could never plan a photograph. One could never. I
Wow.
could never plan a photograph like this. It's stunning, and I
Uh,
can't. And I'm sure I've tried it, and it's never succeeded like anything like he does. So amazing.
well, you have had your successes. Don't sell
Yeah.
yourself short. And so you are the first person on our program who has taken one of his own images to talk about in the MyFIVE series. So I'm excited to hear what you have about this brilliant image. It's so fantastic.
Okay. Well, I didn't mean to be conceited or anything,
No, no,
but
no.
I deep down, I don't feel that my work, as I mentioned to you before, that my work gets out there as much as it could or should. And I'm sure every photographer feels that. So I said, let me take this opportunity and show one of my favorite pictures that I've ever taken. And I took this in 1970, Coney Island. I've done 3 books on Coney Island. He's in 2 books. I saw this is before in 1970. This was before I was a photographer. I was working in on Madison Avenue in the ad agency business before I quit in the late 70s to become a full-time photographer. And I was out in Coney Island, and this is on the pier, and at that time it's a wooden pier. It burned. I mean, there's been 3 piers since I've been there. 4 piers. One burned down. One was blown away in a hurricane or a storm, and now they have a concrete pier that's nothing like this and not as warm and friendly. So I saw him. I got to my knees. I dropped down. He was looking down at his book. I clicked the shutter, and it was a kind of a noisy old camera, 1960-ish camera, 35 millimeter. He looked up, and that's when I shot the second one. And then he waved to me. He said, "Get away, get away." I got up and walked away. I didn't speak to him again before I was a photographer, but I was attracted so much to his thinness, his old-fashionedness, and even in 1970, his bow tie, his funny hat. He has his lunch probably in his lap, and how thin he is, and how he stood out. I can't remember if there were many people around. There were some. I mean, it was summer, obviously. It was probably a weekend that I would go out there because I was working. And this photograph was published in Life magazine in December 1970. It was the first photograph I ever had published.
Wow.
This is even before I was a photographer. So it means a lot to me. And I always say, well, I should have quit while I was ahead by being published in Life magazine. I think they even paid me, and I wasn't even a photographer.
You were then.
Wow. So this is a photograph near and dear to my heart.
It's lovely. I'm glad to see it, and I'm glad you showed it. Thank you.
Yeah,
So
great.
we're now going to talk about a photographer who you told me before we started talking about this, you think she is the greatest photographer going right now.
I think she's
Margarita.
the best photographer in the world, and I embarrassed the hell out of her by saying it. Her name is Margarita Michalos. She's Greek. I met her at ICP. She was a student of mine in a class in 2011, and we've become friends. I do make some friends uh, with my
So I'm
students,
told.
and we are travel partners now. She's married to a Greek diplomat, and she told me the story about this photograph where she saw this is a Muslim boy in Varanasi, India. I love this picture. It's a beautiful photograph. She said she was attracted to the boy's face. He was playing with friends nearby his house. She noticed the background, the wall, the painting on the wall, and the colors. She specifically said the colors. She asked the boy if she could photograph him, and he picked up his lamb without her telling him, and she walked him to this spot nearby, and he didn't smile, and he just posed like this, and I'm not sure how many frames she took. She took this in around 2016. Her work is more candid and is very layered. She's great at layering and showing an instant that I would never see probably, that is here and there so instantaneously, and she's able to capture it. She's really fast. And this, I think she gave me this photograph. I probably have this. She's given me many of her photographs. We trade photographs. I think it's an amazing photograph. So,
Ellen Levitt, you mentioned in the intro as one of your
I,
images of influence.
yeah. She's very fast also, and she was prominent in the 40s, 50s, 60s. So I like this photograph because it's really breezy, it's very spontaneous, it's quick. She's done great work with children. Very lyrical, her photographs. Very decisive moment before Cartier-Bresson even.
This one always reminded me of the Cartier-Bresson image with the little boy carrying was a bottle of wine or something in his
Oh
between
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I think in Italy, and he's smiling and he's
Yes,
very proud.
joyful. And your final image from Lee Friedlander, who
Yeah,
I have always been fascinated with his imagery. I
yeah.
can I am wrestling in my 60s to understand it. So I love it when people
Oh,
talk about his images because I'm still
good,
working
good.
to
I'm not the first one, right? Of course. I mean, he's so amazing. I think
yes.
and I said this before, I think he's the most intelligent or one of the most intelligent photographers. The way he uh, explores the world. His compositions, they're so well thought out. Look at this. This is a dog waiting to cross the street just like a human would at an intersection and at a red light, green light. There's a pun for me with a fire hydrant there
Yeah.
because dogs
Oh,
love
dogs and
fire
fire
hydrants.
hydrants.
So there's that connection. So with Winogrand and his city and very crowded scenes, this is very open, spacious, sunlit. And I would think, and probably I did, look at this and go right by it. Oh, this is a boring image. This is a boring image. Look at the vertical poles and how it splits up the photograph into vertical rectangles, and the light stand to the telephone pole to the stoplight pole, and then all the verticals on the building, and then there's some horizontals, and then the car to me pointed at the dog, ready to run the poor thing over, the poor helpless thing. And the dog has a collar, but there's no one with him. There's no leash. What is the dog doing there? I could never do this. I could never do. So I enjoy work that I don't do of other photographers that seem to me to be so masterly. Friedlander goes from one subject to a totally different subject. He's a terrific street photographer. He did self-portraits on the street. He goes to the desert and photographs saguaro cactuses, and then he does nudes, and then he does New Orleans jazz funerals on the street. I mean, it's he just can do anything. He
Yeah.
can just do any subject
So,
there is.
I mean, that's one of the things about um like different photographers. I think Meyerowitz is a little bit that way in that
Yeah,
he started on street, but then Cape Light with the things that he was doing there and the portraits he was doing. He sort of covered so many different things,
yeah.
and I'm
9/11.
I'm just sitting here with like I'm doing street and I can barely handle that, and these people are out doing all it's to be able to think in so many different ways is such an impressive thing to be. You're a bit that way as well. So
Not as much as some, but more than others. And you do what you can do, and I'm happy. I love doing what I do, and I'm always looking, and I'm always shooting and trying to extend myself. At this point, I don't think I want to. I want a new street cam. I want a new Leica maybe, but I don't know that I would change much more at this
well,
point.
Harvey Stein, thank you so much for coming and joining us on the Crit House and talking about your MyFIVE images. It's a pleasure talking to you and meeting you.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. It's been great. I love
Absolutely.
talking.
And thank you all for watching the Crit House.